Imagine waking up in a world where intelligence is no longer a virtue, but a burden, where questioning the narrative makes you dangerous and critical thinking is replaced by emotional reaction. Think about it. We live in the most connected, technologically advanced era in human history, and yet never before have people been so disconnected from truth, wisdom, and self-awareness. Something profound is happening. We are witnessing not merely a cultural decline, but an intellectual one, the slow, systematic creation of the dumbest generation in history. This is not an insult to any particular age group, but a reflection of what society has become. Our world rewards noise over knowledge, appearance over depth, and speed over understanding. We have access to the collective knowledge of humanity in the palm of our hands, yet we use it mostly for distraction, validation, and entertainment. The problem is not technology itself, but how we have allowed it to shape our minds and our souls. Before we go deeper, take a moment to reflect. How often do you genuinely think for yourself? How often do you question the information you consume daily? Do you ever pause before reacting, or has your mind been conditioned to respond instantly to the next stimulus? These questions are not meant to accuse, but to awaken. Because the truth is, the greatest threat to humanity today is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. This video may challenge some of your beliefs, but if you stay until the end, you'll discover insights that can truly change the way you see yourself and the world, especially the final revelation, the most important and powerful one of all. Now, let's begin our journey. To understand how we've arrived at this point, we need to look beyond smartphones, social media, or education systems. The roots of this phenomenon go deep into psychology and philosophy. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once warned that the greatest danger to humanity is the leveling of the individual, the process by which everyone becomes the same, not through equality of potential, but through mediocrity. In our age, that leveling force is digital culture. It makes everyone feel like an expert, yet no one truly understands anything. It gives the illusion of participation, but removes the responsibility of thought. Psychologists like Carl Jung also foresaw this collective decay of consciousness. He spoke of the mass man, the person who has surrendered individuality to blend into the collective. When you lose your capacity for inner reflection, you become vulnerable to the manipulation of mass opinion. Jung warned that the crowd mind is dangerous because it destroys the capacity for moral judgment. When thinking becomes collective, it stops being deep. It becomes reactive, emotional, and superficial. Look around. Is that not exactly what we see today? Social media has transformed our brains into feedback loops of dopamine and validation. Instead of cultivating wisdom, we curate images of ourselves to fit trends. Instead of learning, we scroll. Instead of thinking, we react. What we call communication has become performance. What we call information has become noise. And the tragedy is, we mistake this for progress. But here's the paradox. Never before have we been given so much power to know, to learn, to grow, and never before have we used it so poorly. The philosopher Neil Postman, in his prophetic book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, warned that technology would not enslave us through force, but through pleasure. He compared our future not to Orwell's 1984, but to Huxley's Brave New World, where people are controlled not by fear, but by distraction. In that world, truth becomes irrelevant because no one cares enough to seek it. That world has arrived. Ask yourself, when was the last time you read something deeply challenging? Not because it was long, but because it required you to think. When was the last time you felt uncomfortable with your own ignorance and decided to learn rather than scroll past it? Our attention has become the new currency, and the systems around us are designed to capture it, fragment it, and sell it back to us. The result is a generation that confuses opinions with facts, feelings with truths, and trends with meaning. But there's more to this story, and it goes even deeper than the digital world. The dumbing down of society is not accidental. It's a consequence of how modern systems, educational, cultural, and even political, are structured. As we will see in the next part, this manipulation of awareness didn't begin with smartphones or algorithms. It began long before that, when society decided that conformity was more valuable than consciousness. To understand how we are creating the dumbest generation in history, we must recognize that this didn't happen overnight. It's the outcome of decades of conditioning, where independent thinking has been slowly replaced by programmed compliance. From childhood, we are taught not to question but to memorize, not to explore but to conform. Our education systems have become factories of obedience rather than sanctuaries of wisdom. Schools are designed to produce workers who follow orders, not thinkers who challenge the system. The philosopher Ivan Illich, in his book Deschooling Society, argued that formal education has been used to standardize the human mind, much like industrial machines standardize production. The system rewards repetition, not creativity. It prizes good grades over good questions. Children grow up learning how to pass tests, not how to think. By the time they reach adulthood, their natural curiosity has been replaced by fear of being wrong, and a society afraid of error becomes a society afraid of truth. But the real danger emerges when these same minds conditioned to conform enter a digital environment that feeds them personalized illusions. The algorithms learn their fears, desires, and biases, and then feed them more of the same, trapping them in invisible echo chambers. What they see feels like truth, but it's only a reflection of their conditioning. As French philosopher Jean Baudrillard once said, "We no longer live in reality, but in simulacra, a world of copies without originals. The truth has been replaced by what feels true." Think about it. The average person today spends more time staring at screens than they do in nature, with family, or even in their own thoughts. Their reality is mediated through pixels. Their emotions are dictated by trends. Their sense of self-worth rises and falls with digital approval. And as attention spans shrink, so does the capacity for deep thinking. We no longer process ideas. We consume fragments. We are flooded with information but starved for meaning. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you sat in silence, without music, without a phone, without a screen, and just listened to your thoughts? For many, silence is unbearable because it exposes the emptiness within. The mind, once trained for constant stimulation, becomes restless in stillness. But it's in that stillness that awareness grows and wisdom is born. This is something the modern world desperately tries to make us forget, because a conscious mind cannot be easily controlled. This is not a coincidence. As the writer Aldous Huxley warned, the most effective form of tyranny is the one that makes people love their servitude. When entertainment becomes a tool of control, people no longer resist. They comply willingly, believing they are free. Today's digital platforms are not simply tools. They are psychological environments designed to condition attention, emotion, and thought. The more addicted we become, the more predictable we are. And predictability is power. We have also replaced depth with speed. We scroll faster, think faster, react faster, but understand less. The philosopher Byung-Chul Han describes this as the society of fatigue, where endless stimulation leads to mental exhaustion and spiritual emptiness. People are not dumb because they lack intelligence, but because their mental energy is constantly dispersed and consumed by trivialities. The modern mind is overstimulated, yet undernourished. Even the idea of being informed has been corrupted. The news cycle no longer seeks truth but engagement. Outrage and fear sell better than reason and understanding. Every headline is crafted to provoke emotion, not reflection. As a result, we mistake being emotionally reactive for being intellectually awake. But reacting is not thinking. In fact, it's the opposite. Carl Jung warned that when we lose contact with our inner self, we become susceptible to mass psychosis, the collective madness that arises when individuals stop thinking independently. He saw this phenomenon take root in the 20th century through propaganda, but what he couldn't have imagined is how effortlessly the 21st century would perfect it through technology. Now, manipulation doesn't come from loud voices, but from silent algorithms that learn us better than we know ourselves. And yet, despite all this, there is hope, because awareness is the first act of rebellion. Once you see the mechanisms behind the illusion, you begin to regain your power. The question is, will we continue to surrender our minds to distraction and conformity, or will we reclaim the ancient art of thinking? As philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once said, the greatest achievements of the human mind are generally received with distrust. Maybe it's time we start distrusting the noise and listening once again to the silence within. In the next part, we'll go deeper. We'll explore how cultural and political structures reinforce this intellectual decay and how mass manipulation has evolved into something far more subtle, a form of control that doesn't look like control at all. Understanding this next layer is essential, because it reveals how entire generations are shaped not by truth, but by the narratives they're told to believe. To grasp how deeply this intellectual decline has infiltrated society, we must confront a difficult truth. Ignorance today is not the absence of information. It's the product of manipulation. The systems shaping modern consciousness do not simply fail to educate us. They are designed to keep us distracted, divided, and dependent. When control over a population becomes too visible, people rebel. But when control is disguised as comfort, people comply willingly. Modern culture thrives on this comfort. The masses are given endless entertainment, infinite choice, and superficial empowerment. But behind the glittering facade lies a quiet obedience, a generation that has mistaken access for understanding, opinion for knowledge, and pleasure for freedom. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche foresaw this in his concept of the last man, a being who seeks only comfort and safety, who no longer dreams of greatness or transcendence, who fears risk and avoids pain. Nietzsche warned that when humanity reaches this stage, it ceases to evolve. It becomes docile, complacent, and ultimately empty. Look around. The last man is no longer a warning. He is everywhere. He scrolls through life in pursuit of the next dopamine hit, the next distraction, the next validation. He has traded wisdom for convenience, courage for comfort, and reflection for reaction. And the tragic irony is that he believes he is free. But a mind enslaved by distraction cannot be free. It is a prisoner of its own impulses. Mass media and politics understand this perfectly. They do not educate, they agitate. They do not inform, they influence. They have mastered the art of shaping perception through repetition and emotion. Edward Bernays, often called the father of modern propaganda, once said that the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the masses is an essential element of democratic society. He didn't mean it as a warning. He meant it as a manual. His ideas laid the foundation for modern advertising, public relations, and the social engineering we now experience daily. The goal is not to make you think, but to make you feel, and then to make you act on those feelings predictably. Think about how language itself has been weaponized. Words like freedom, truth, justice, or progress are constantly used, but rarely defined. They have become emotional triggers rather than concepts to understand. The philosopher George Orwell in 1984 described this as newspeak, a language designed to limit the range of thought. If you can't articulate a complex idea, you can't think it. Reduce language and you reduce thought. That's exactly what's happening today. Not through force, but through simplification, memes, and slogans. Depth is disappearing beneath the surface of instant gratification. The most dangerous part is how this erosion of thought affects identity. When people lose their ability to think deeply, they cling to group identities to feel secure. They no longer ask, who am I, but rather, which side am I on? Collective belonging replaces individual integrity, and when identity becomes political, truth becomes irrelevant. What matters is not what's real, but what aligns with the tribe. This is why society feels increasingly divided, not because we know less, but because we've been trained to stop listening and start labeling. The ancient philosophers understood that wisdom begins with self-knowledge. Socrates said that the unexamined life is not worth living. But what does self-knowledge mean in an age where the self is constantly curated, filtered, and performed online? How can we know who we are when every day we are told what to think, how to feel, and what to fear? This is not progress, it's regression disguised as evolution. There is also a spiritual dimension to this crisis. When meaning collapses, nihilism takes root. People begin to believe that nothing matters, that truth is subjective, and that existence itself is meaningless. But this despair is not natural. It's engineered. The constant bombardment of information without context numbs the spirit. The constant comparison to others destroys self-worth. The constant pursuit of pleasure replaces purpose. This spiritual emptiness is what the philosopher Viktor Frankl called the existential vacuum, the void left when meaning is lost. And in that vacuum, manipulation thrives. We see this everywhere, in politics, marketing, entertainment, and even education. Systems that should elevate consciousness now feed on attention and emotion. Every institution that once guided humanity toward wisdom has been reprogrammed for consumption. The result? A civilization that confuses stimulation with fulfillment. People no longer seek truth because truth requires effort, patience, and courage, qualities that modern culture subtly discourages. Yet, the awakening begins when you recognize the pattern. When you start to notice how easily emotions are weaponized against reason, how outrage replaces understanding, and how division replaces dialogue. When you realize that what is called progress often serves to weaken independent thought rather than strengthen it. The question then is not, how did we get here, but how do we get out? In the next part, we will uncover that answer. We'll explore how to reclaim the mind, the spirit, and the ability to think freely in a world designed to suppress it. The final revelation, and the most important of all, and is not just about society, but about you. Because the antidote to collective ignorance is individual awakening. The truth is both simple and terrifying. We are not just creating the dumbest generation in history, we are allowing it. Every moment we choose convenience over curiosity, comfort over courage, and distraction over depth, we contribute to this silent collapse of consciousness. But awareness, real awareness, has always been the cure for ignorance. It's time to remember that intelligence is not about information, it's about transformation. The first step to reclaiming our minds is to recognize the prison we live in, the mental one. Philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti once said that it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. We live in a culture that rewards conformity, not creativity, imitation, not insight. It teaches us to think within boundaries and punishes those who dare to question them. Yet all progress, scientific, moral, or spiritual, began with someone who refused to obey. To awaken is to become dangerous to the systems that thrive on your unconsciousness. This awakening begins in silence. Turn off the noise for a moment, the endless scroll, the constant notifications, the manufactured outrage. In that silence, you will begin to hear something most people have forgotten: your own thoughts. Reflection is rebellion. The act of thinking deeply in a world that discourages thought is revolutionary. You do not need permission to think. You need courage to face what you might discover. Ask yourself, what do I truly know? Not what I've been told, not what I've read online, but what I have experienced as true. This distinction between belief and understanding is what separates wisdom from ignorance. The dumbest generation is not one that lacks access to information, but one that confuses data with truth. Knowledge without reflection becomes noise. Reflection without courage becomes paralysis. The union of both, reflection and courage, creates awakening. Carl Jung said that the greatest burden of modern man is the loss of meaning. He believed that the root of all neurosis was spiritual emptiness, a disconnect between who we are and who we are told to be. Reclaiming intelligence, therefore, is not about accumulating facts, but restoring meaning to our lives. It's about remembering that truth is not found in algorithms or ideologies, but in direct experience, introspection, and empathy. To be truly intelligent is to see beyond appearances, to perceive the hidden patterns of life that technology can never replicate. We must also relearn the ancient art of questioning. Socrates didn't teach answers. He taught the courage to ask better questions. Today, questions are discouraged because they disrupt the system. But every great breakthrough, every leap in human understanding, began with a single question that challenged the accepted narrative. What if the world is not as it seems? What if the very systems we trust to educate us are designed to keep us docile? What if intelligence, as we define it today, is a clever disguise for conformity? These questions are dangerous because they ignite awareness, and awareness, once awakened, cannot be silenced. You begin to see that every advertisement, every headline, every trending topic is part of an economy built on your attention. You realize that the more distracted you are, the more predictable you become. The antidote, therefore, is not to reject technology, but to master it, to use it consciously rather than be used by it. The difference between a tool and a trap lies in who controls whom. We must also cultivate depth in an age of superficiality. Read books that challenge you. Seek silence that scares you. Engage in conversations that make you uncomfortable. Disconnect from the digital world long enough to reconnect with the real one, with nature, with people, with yourself. Remember that wisdom is not a product of speed, but of stillness. Every great thinker, from Marcus Aurelius to Nietzsche, from Jung to Krishnamurti, understood that solitude is not loneliness. It is where the soul begins to see clearly. This is the final revelation, the most powerful truth of all. The future of intelligence depends on you. Society may be drifting toward collective stupidity, but consciousness evolves individually. You cannot awaken the world, but you can awaken yourself, and in doing so you become a beacon for others. Light does not argue with darkness, it simply shines. The revolution of the mind begins in one person at a time, one act of awareness, one choice of truth, one refusal to conform. We are not doomed to create the dumbest generation in history. We are capable of becoming the most awakened one, but only if we choose consciousness over comfort, truth over illusion, and wisdom over distraction. The power lies not in information, but in understanding. The world doesn't need more data, it needs more depth. It doesn't need louder voices, it needs clearer minds. So ask yourself now, will you continue to be shaped by the noise, or will you reclaim your right to think, to question, to awaken? The dumbest generation is not a prophecy, it is a choice. And the moment you decide to see clearly, to seek meaning, to live with awareness, that's the moment the illusion begins to crumble. Because in the end, intelligence is not measured by what you know, but by your ability to see what others refuse to see. And perhaps that is where humanity's true evolution begins. Thanks for looking.